round 19 kicked off with my Adelaide Crows taking on the Essendon Bombers, and oh my gosh, was this stressful. I spent the entire game, I couldn't even put on my TV, I had to have it on my iPad because I was walking around the entire house with it. Frustrating, and still struggling to understand what is holding the ball, what isn't holding the ball. There were some calls that I just couldn't get my head around that were made, and then some that weren't made. So that's an ongoing issue in the AFL, but this game took my stress levels to a whole new stratosphere, it felt like. But thankfully, Crows in the end got the win, clutched it out, as Essendon did miss a few big chances in the end. But this would have to be up there for one of the games of the year. I mean, this round alone, it felt like we got a few between this. The Sydney-Brisbane game had to be up there as well. And then even the Hawks-Pies game, although not as close, provided its entertaining moments. But this for me, and bias purely because the Crows won, but would have to be my favourite round, or game of the round, I should say. And it was big. I think it was an important win for the Crows to get it back after earlier in the year we had the incident with Sam Draper just falling on the ball and the Crows not getting rewarded for that to win late. And so it was really good to see us battle out and get it there. And that period of time, that second quarter when I think we kicked 8 or 9 straight, it was unbelievable to watch. I was loving every second of it. Then it flips the other side and we have some big injuries go down and we're struggling, and Essendon get on their run to kick 7 unanswered. And then the rest of the game is just back and forth. It was a great game to watch for the neutral, I would say. But it was exciting, but ultimately the Crows got the win, as I said. And that was large part thanks to Ben Keays and Darcy Fogarty. I think they were the two standout players on the Crows side who were able to get it done. And Ben Keays is a controversial player, I think, within the Adelaide fans, I would say, for the most part. Definitely I've got some friends and family who are Crows fans, and some don't rate him very highly, think he's a bit all hard work, which is important, but just doesn't have the quality. And it's good to see this year, I think he's taken a big step into providing some of that quality on the back end. I feel a bit more comfortable with him in front of goal. He gets a bit more reward for that hard work he has, and so that's great to see. And I think he's really taking his game to the next level this year, which was very important, as I think for the Crows as a whole, we've got quite a good squad, I'd say, a good foundation of a team that can be a premiership contender in the future, but I think we're just missing that top end quality. I mean, this week I've seen rumours linking us back with Clayton Oliver, which was heavily rumoured in the off-season last year. Given his off-field troubles, it's unsure. I'm still unsure where I stand with that, to be honest, and whether I think it would be a good move. I know he's getting paid quite a lot of money. If the Crows are able to get Melbourne to cover a portion of that, then I think it could definitely be beneficial, and we'll discuss it if that does come to fruition. But I think that kind of top-end player with that potential, I think, is what the Crows are missing at this stage. So to have a player like Ben Keays step up from last year to have now that bit of quality on top of the hard work, I think is big for the team overall, and puts us in better stead for next year. And then his running mate throughout this game, Darcy Fogarty, kicked 4 to back up Ben Keays' 5, and I think it was crucial. So his link-up play as well is greatly improved. One of the things I think that helped him is having Riley Thilthorpe back. His ability to take a contested mark in the forward line gives another option so that Fogarty can be hit out on that lead, which is where his strengths lie. He's great kick for goal, and so, but he's not necessarily that massive pack marker. He's a bit similar to Tex, I would say, in that regards of if you hit him on lead, a bit better around the ground than a lot of traditional forwards, but he's not quite that same pack mark. But I think having that extra tool there who can alleviate some of that gives the defence another option to talk about. So I think Fogarty had an outstanding game, and I think that was really important. And then it was great to see Josh Rochelle get that winner at the end. It put all that emotion. He's come under a lot of scrutiny through this year, and some of it's rightly so, and he's admitted that. I think my favourite part about it is the fact he was willing to take ownership and really understand that he needs to buckle down. And I remember I'd speak to like my brother and cousins talking about it and be like, the Crows' dream player is Ben Keys' work rate with Josh Rochelli's talent. If you could combine then, I mean, it's basically Isaac Rankin. But just having another one of those is really important. And so the fact we can get Josh Rochelli involved a bit more to kick threes, I think he's definitely going to be one of those more moments kind of players. He won't necessarily pop up throughout the whole game, but he'll be there in those late moments. And you always need a player like that. Hopefully he can do a bit more throughout the game as well, but I think that was important for him, and showing the passion is something you love to see. I mean, we saw it in the Hawks Pies game, which I'll get to. That passion, that fun, I think is something that the newer generation really bring to the sport, and I think it's important that that stays around. But that was the biggest thing for the Crows, I think, to really get that win and try and get some momentum. They've spoken themselves that they don't believe they're out of finals, and while I'd love them to somehow make it as a fan, I don't think that's realistic. I think we're just too far back at this stage, which is unfortunate. But I think it's a bright mindset to have, to get some wins, get that momentum, and really try and push so next year we can start strong. I think that's kind of what we hoped last year would happen into this year. But unfortunately this year we've just had some costly injuries, I think, to some big players. It's been a case of not necessarily had the number of injuries, but the players, it was two, missing about a third of our starting 18 has been rough. And so I think their ability to get this win without Tex, without Rankin, without Miller, we then also saw Dawson go down late and miss most of the last quarter. We lost Murray early, we lost Butts early, and so to shuffle the team around and provide and have that character to really keep going, I think was really important for the team, and something they can hope to carry on that mindset going forward. And then for Essendon, the slide's scary. I think they started the year so strong, but they are just sliding down, and to not get the win over a Crows team that hadn't been great throughout the year. I mean, we've definitely hit form in the last month or so, but to not hold out when they had the opportunities to make simple mistakes like Draper hitting the post. But it was Nate Caddy who was the one to try and snap banana it when he should have ran in, and then ended up missing everything, which when you lose by 2 points, that's a big issue to have those lapses, and they'll learn from it. But I think the concern is that their form and compared to the teams around them, I think it's definitely a worry. And if they somehow miss finals, I think there'll be some big questions asked of the coach and of the playing group. And because I also, just looking at their roster, I can't see how they compete with the other teams around that you'd think will get better and will improve. It feels like it's Essendon's best chance in recent history, and in the next couple of years to potentially try and get that finals voodoo out the way and win that final. But we'll get to it as we get to the ladder prediction. But as things stand, I'm not sure that this will actually be the year they can do it. But we'll wait and see and go from there. But I think that's all we can sort of touch on for the Crows Essendon game. I think it's time we get into GWS take on the Giants. Continue to prove that they are real contenders in this year's premiership race as they beat the Gold Coast Suns at their home ground. I mean, from a Suns perspective, that just the away form woes continue, and they'd be the real concern for Damien Hardwick and his coaching team. But for the Giants, they'd be loving life. I think they've really hit their form. They've got Jesse Hogan playing amazing. That team, they've still got big players to come back like Cornelio, and so I think it's all sunshines at this stage for the Giants. I think they, I mean, no pun intended on them beating the Suns there, but I think their ability to, now they've gone through the dip, that they seem to be really, there's a great camaraderie within the team. You saw that with Jesse Hogan, although in a race for the Coleman, passing the ball off in the goal square, getting his teammates involved, really focused on that mindset and that in getting their teams involved. So I think that's important for the Giants, and I think fans of them should be really excited for what they could do in September when that time comes. I think they'll be challenging for the top four. I think they'll definitely have aspirations of making there. Given they were unlucky last year against Collingwood in that preliminary final, we can see them really having a point to prove come September. I think they're definitely on their way to making that charge. I don't know whether this is the year for them to getting their first premiership, but I think they've definitely got as good a shot as pretty much any team outside of Sydney and Carlton so far. So I think that's exciting times if you're a Giants fan, because it also doesn't look as though it's something that's going to slow down. I think next year you can see them being just as good and just as competitive, if not more. So I think that's exciting times for the GWS Giants. I think it's a shame their stadium leaves a little to be desired in terms of an atmosphere. It's pretty rubbish on TV. I know there's been talks about them playing finals at the SCG, which, while I understand, and you get this in Melbourne with the MCG as well, I understand wanting to fill out more seats in stadiums and get more fans to the games. I think it's always important, and I think it's important in Melbourne when you compare, say, playing Marvel to the MCG. I think you should try and put as many games at the MCG as you can in finals, just so more fans are able to go. But I think them moving to finals games to the SCG, I think, can sometimes compromise that the actual nature of their home ground advantage. I think if they do finish in a spot where they get a home final, that is a concern. I think important things playing at home provide are routine and structure, and those 1%ers that AFL players and elite athletes really thrive on. I think they do make all the difference, and I think that's why topics such as interstate travel have become so prevalent of late. I think that all the travel for the Western Australia teams that they have to do, and interstate teams in general, when you compare that to sides like Collingwood, who seemingly don't have to leave the MCG at all for their games, and then also for Geelong playing their games at the MCG rather than GMHBA Stadium. I think that also applies to them, that they should be able to play their game at the ground they choose, and if they think that their home ground is a sufficient enough advantage that gives them the best chance of winning the premiership, then they should be able to do that and able to choose. I think, you switch sides and you look at the Suns. If they were to get to finals and then the AFL said you're not playing at your stadium, you're playing up at the Gabba, then I think they'd be a bit annoyed about that given their form. And I think while you can appreciate the more fans, I think also you need to take into account what the team can do at the ground and what their preference is for what they've worked hard throughout the season. But for the Suns, I think a home final is obviously a long way away from what they should be focused on at the moment. I think they away form continues to be an issue, and you'd have to be wondering what's going on in the background, and is it their preparation? Is it a mentality thing? What is it when they travel? Because it seems as though they just cannot win. Well, it doesn't seem it. They just simply cannot win away from home, and that's got to be a concern for all the fans and the staff involved. As Damien Hardwick, who's someone who has won premiership, he built that dynasty at Richmond. He took them from when they were terrible all the way up to winning those 3 flags, and I think he knows what it takes to win, and so you definitely wouldn't be putting the blame on him. And I think he's noticed some things in the locker room that must be causing concern for his comments after their last loss away, when he said the team needed to grow up. I think he's noticing some things, and it would be curious to see it'd be curious to know what they are, because unfortunately I think that's one of the behind the scenes insights that we just won't ever quite find out. But it'd be curious to know what the issue is in terms of what is there something that they do differently to other teams that travel so much that could be causing this. Because I think it's something that if the Suns miss out on finals, they're going to be looking at that away form and going, even if they just could have pipped North at Marvel, I believe is where they played him, if they can beat Richmond away and then beat West Coast away, those 3 games at the bottom of the teams they should beat, teams they're better than, I think they'd be much higher up the ladder, and they'll be looking at those 3 games going, why couldn't we just get that done? And because it may be a case of they would have got in, they'd then play a Geelong side potentially away from home, and then at that point they probably lose in the first round and they're out of finals and it's one and done. But for a club that still has not made finals in its I think we're going on 12 years, I think they've been around, and still not made finals. And then you've got the comparison to Giants, who came in after them and have made a grand final, they've made multiple prelims and seem to be a real contender. I think the Suns will really need to do a review. If they can't do it now, it would need to be done in the off-season as to what's going on, and maybe bring in some experienced players around the locker room that can be what can help them. And I wouldn't be shocked to see a Dusty Martin pulling on a Suns Guernsey next year. I can see him calling it quits with his time with the Tigers, allowing them to go through their rebuild phase, and then potentially going up to Gold Coast, enjoying the weather, be under Damien Hardwick. They can maybe manage him a bit more, and just providing that locker room presence. He's not known as quite a loud guy in the locker room, I believe. He's known to be quite humble, but I think that experience he can provide. And I'm not a big Dusty fan. I can appreciate he's a great player. I think he's not quite in that GOAT debate that I think a lot of media personalities, especially in Melbourne, do put him in. But I think he's a great player and deserves respect. I think he can provide a lot to the Suns next season, just in that locker room and that experience. That kind of on-field coach, I think, would be something crucial to them. So coming out of this game, I think it's just a case of the Giants are the real deal and they're real contenders, and it'll be a scary sight come September. And if the Suns want to play finals, they need to turn around that away form very quickly, or else it's going to be too little too late, and they just won't be there. But it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, and seeing where the chips lie. And when we get to the ladder predictor, we'll see if I have the Suns making it, or if I have where I have the Giants finish. But we'll discuss that further then. And for now, we'll go through a quick rundown of St Kilda versus West Coast. The midday game on Saturday saw the St Kilda Saints take on the West Coast Eagles and absolutely pummeled them by a 12-goal margin, 72 points. And this was a much needed win for the St Kilda Saints, I think. Obviously a disappointing season. Ross Lyon has come under fire a fair bit, and potentially rightly so, given their lack of success over the years, I think. But I think they just need to get back on the winning track, get some momentum, and just get some morale back in the squad. I think it was great to see Membry kicked 5, I believe, or 6, and then so I think that's important. And just getting without Max King, I think that's what you want. Putting up 113 points, it's that confidence boost they need. Unfortunately for them, it is just too little too late in the overall season. I think they're obviously way out of finals. There's a clear, it feels like there's several tiers this season, and they're a bit better than, they're just outside that bottom group of your West Coast, Kangaroos and Richmond. Then, in my opinion, and I may be biased, I think you could argue you've then got the Crows and the Saints, who are just better than their ladder position suggests. I think you could argue, but for me, I would say the Crows are probably a tier above them, and then you've got the tier above, which is your finals contention. So I think you've got the Saints obviously disappointing this season, I think, but ultimately to be able to prove that there is some distance between them and West Coast, and prove that they are still capable of winning on any day, and need to be taken with a degree of respect. I think that's great for them, but ultimately inconsequential to their season. West Coast, I think it's not surprising. They would have expected to lose. They did lose. I don't think there was anything overly noteworthy for their performances. I mean, a big one I think that the West Coast are just taking on this year is the fact that their season is about Harley Reid. That's what they're focused on. They need Harley Reid to develop as much as he can, and he came out the gates flying. He then got that suspension, which unfortunately ruled him out of the Rising Star Award, which side tangent for me. I think it's disappointing that a suspension can rule you out of the Brownlow and the NAB Rising Star, but can still win your club best and fairest. To me, that just doesn't make any sense. But it still is what it is. I don't think it'll change. I think he'll get his back when he probably wins a Brownlow one day. I wouldn't be shocked if he does. But since he got that suspension, he hasn't quite been on that same pace. I think in this game he got 19 disposals, had a solid outing, but nothing overly noteworthy. I think teams would have really focused on him. He's now a bit more of a known quantity, focused on him, tagged him, especially with a West Coast side that struggles, and there's not too many other options on for the opposition coach to think about it. That in that midfield, they're focused on Harley and stopping him. I think he still had a solid year, and I think that's all the West Coast are really focused on. They'll just want to be competitive, but tanking very similar to Kangaroos and Richmond. I think Richmond will struggle more for the competitiveness. West Coast, I think this is just a bad outing at Marvel, for the games at Optus, I think that's where they'll really trying to be competitive. When you're such a poor side, I think that's the travelling's typically the bit, or winning away from home is typically the first struggle, and so there's nothing too much here. I think West Coast fans will be unsurprised with ultimately, but short, sharp recap of this game. I don't think there's anything that really needs to be discussed further about it. Good win for the Saints, but no one's ladder position really changes too much, I don't think. And possibly the funnest game of the round to watch, the Hawthorn Hawks absolutely obliterated the Collingwood Magpies, and just that young team was running riot over Collingwood, and it was a great sight to see as a mostly neutral, I would say, just in the sense of, as with most AFL fans, cannot stand Collingwood, but so in that regard, it was great to see them lose, but ultimately no skin in the game for either team. It was good to see Hawthorn, their young players, just the freedom and character they play with. It's exciting and it's fun to watch. And I mentioned it earlier when talking about Rochelle, is this new breed of young players. They bring so much personality to the game. I think that's what you want to see. That's what brings in the characters. That's part of the reason why leagues such as the NFL and NBA are so big, is the fact that the personalities, those players, what their tendencies are. They can feel larger than life. It's not just about their on-field or on-court abilities. It's about everything else they do, that the importance and that playfulness they see. It's how you'll see the gritty come about in the NFL and NBA with Justin Jefferson and Ja Morant, Branson notoriety, and then you've got the LeBron silencer celebration where he does the big stomp and the pounding the chest, the LeBron chalk toss, those exciting moments, those character and personality moments. You're seeing that finally come into the AFL, and I think it's needed. I think when you're a sport that is so small retrospective to the world, or in regards to the rest of the world, I think you need to be able to look at yourself and go, well, how can we grow? It's obviously great to be the number one sport in Australia, but you want to look at an NBA and an NFL and see how can we get to, maybe not on those levels, but maybe, I can't see a reason why with the correct marketing and structures in place, you couldn't get AFL to a similar level of notoriety as a NHL. I think that's fair to say, where it's clearly the fourth sport of the big four in America, and while Australia doesn't have the same number of people, obviously, as Americans, and so it can be a bit of a shoulder to pull those fans. I think that can be the goal, to be on the same level as an NHL or even a college football, which is massive, but still then even probably the fifth biggest league, or leagues in America. I think that's what the AFL should strive for, and I think players like the Hawks core with Ginnivan and the Wiz and things like that. I think they're players that are crucial to bringing that in, and I think that personality, it makes it enjoyable to watch. It makes the players feel larger than life, as I said, and feel you're invested in them. Whether you think Jack Ginnivan is a bit of a villain, as he was when he kind of first came in. It felt like he always played for free kicks, and he kind of had that villain role, or like Toby Green's a bit of that villain. I think then you want to watch them because you want to watch them lose, and it's almost like a pro wrestling trope, that you have the face and the heel. I think in all sports that's typically a way things go, is you want to have it where even a neutral can get invested, and I think you can get that from having characters and having personalities, where it's like, oh, I don't support that team, but that player I really like, and I really get behind that personality, or well, like they're really annoying, like I want to see them lose. I think you can try and implement that with letting players really be themselves and be a bit rash and bold. I think it's exciting for the game and something you want. I think the AFL should want to keep going and market better. I think the AFL's, to me, their biggest issue when it comes to their growth is their overall marketing. And as someone who's got a marketing degree and works in sports marketing, that's what I can see, and I think that's what holds them back, is that like a desire to show those personalities. But getting back to this game after that tangent, I think it was exciting to see Jack Ginnivan play with the freedom and put his old team to the sword. I think that was really good, and the bit where he walks over to the Collingwood fans, he does the Steph Curry night celebration. I loved it. And as someone who, honestly, I didn't like Jack Ginnivan, especially when he first came into the league. The free kick issues would really annoy me in the media around it, because it was he came in, he'd play for free kicks clearly, and then it was boy who cried wolf, because then it was he got free kicks all the time. The umpire said, well, now we can see you routinely will either drop your knees out or drop your shoulder so that you're getting taken high, which in itself is a dangerous thing to do. We're now just not going to pay you those same free kicks because it's reasonable for us to believe that's what you're doing. And then it became a big, oh, Jack Ginnivan never gets free kicks. It was boy who cried wolf, and so for a large portion of his career, I've kind of not been a fan of him because of that, and part of that definitely has to do with him playing on Collingwood, and not. There's some Collingwood players that I like, and some are, and a few more I respect and regard quite highly, but like I said, Jack Ginnivan, I just was not a fan of at all. But then in this game, see him playing with that freedom and just really enjoying themselves and seemingly having the time of his life and looking like he's living his dream, which is what he is doing, and being able to be his personality and be himself. I think it made me quite like him and really turn my opinion around. I think the Hawks are a fun team to watch. They're definitely a team that's worth when you've got that free time sitting down and watching. And I think a big reason is that young core, and that's exciting for Hawks fans going forward, to be back at the top after their previous dynasties in the Franklin Roughhead Hodge era, and having Sam Mitchell as the coach, knowing what it takes to win, I think, but still being able to let the team play and really try and understand what this younger generation is looking to bring to the sport as a whole. I think it was exciting. And for Collingwood, just absolute struggle street. It'll be interesting to see next year what they do with the likes of Pendlebury and Sidebottom. I mean, for me, they're out of finals this year. I don't think they can make it. I think that's I think this was their chance. If they're not going to be able to win this game, I don't think they'll be able to win enough games to get back into the 8. But yeah, with the likes of Sidebottom and Penbury next year, as I said, and how will they go about understanding who do they need to start bleeding younger players like Hawthorn did when they had their older players? Is that where Collingwood need to go? They kind of got that one final premiership with that core, and now they need to look to move on and to keep the comparisons to the NBA, kind of like the Golden State Warriors, where they had the top players. The Warriors had their dynasty. They had their big three of Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Then now we saw in the season just gone, they've kind of gone, well, we have to look at our future and going forward, and so Clay's moved on. Is that something? I mean, I don't know their situation with any of their contracts and where they're at, but is someone like a Still Sidebottom potentially going to move on? Maybe he retires as well. I can imagine they'll try and keep Pendlebury around as long as possible. I think he's kind of that Steph role where you just keep him as long as possible. If I was working for Collingwood in the coaching staff or in the front office, I would want to be saying that guy, he's untouchable, just in the essence of that leadership he provides. You want to make sure you've definitely got him around, and he's still such a great player. But yeah, is someone like a Still Sidebottom going to move so they can bring in some of that younger blood and bring them into the team to be part of the future core with the Dacos brothers, etc. So it'll be interesting to see next year and in the off season what happens with them. And then the Darcy Moore constant complaints you're seeing online and from fans, I think they're a bit too quick to judge. I think when the team as a whole is not playing great, it's very easy to pin the blame. And when your role as a defender is to intercept mark and to roam off your man and kind of play in that space, you run a risk, and it's a calculated risk from Flyer to say that more, we don't want you playing on the number one forward, we want you actually on say the secondary, third option, so that you can roam and intercept and use the great game awareness and IQ to then launch forward. And when they're working, when they won their premiership, it was great. I mean, Darcy Moore was the fan favourite, it seems, but now things aren't going well. It's very easy to look at your captain there, and it'll just be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it could be as simple as the fact he's studying in his spare time, and I think I heard he's getting like a law degree potentially is what he's studying, and so I mean that takes up time. Is it as simple as he's overworked trying to do both, in which case if you're a Collingwood fan or a Collingwood coach, you're quite annoyed about that because they pay him good money to perform on the field, and that's what you need to focus on. Maybe it's something as simple as that, or maybe it's just a premiership hangover, and that's all there is to it, and next year they'll rebound back up. But it'll be tough to say now. It'll be interesting to see how the Collingwood off-season plays out, but ultimately their season's now over after this loss to Hawthorn, and congrats to the Hawks keeping their final charge alive. And another team that was able to do that was the Bulldogs, and so let's get into their game against the Cats. An Adam Treloar-led Western Bulldogs side were able to knock off Geelong in Geelong this weekend, and I think it's an important win for the Bulldogs as they are able to close the gap in on the top 8, keep that finals hopes alive and keep the momentum going. That's 2 wins on the trot for them, and so I think it's exciting times. And for the Bulldogs, they're a tough team to judge, to work out where they sit. I mean, I can see a world where they get into finals and then they've got a 2016 run come from out of nowhere. They've got the players. I mean, when you've got players like Adam Treloar, Marcus Bontempelli, they've got Rory Lebb, who's been a revelation down back, Ugelhagen as well. I think they're a really strong side, and it's been a bit of a weird season for them, but I think this win was crucial, and Geelong are a tough beat at Geelong, but they just put them to the sword. It was an ugly game in the wet. I think at one point, basically, the teams were avoiding whole half of the ground because it was seemingly so wet underfoot, it was like a lake. So it was a wet and tough game, but Bulldogs were able to stay strong and get that win, and it was important. They're now 2 points outside of the 8, which is massive, and that 8th spot's currently occupied by the Bombers, who every chance of sliding out, and so it was an important win for the Bulldogs to get done. And I think from a Geelong standpoint or point of view, I think it's tough to tell how good Geelong are. I mean, I can see just as easy a world where they finish in the top 4 as a world where they finish out the 8. It's just so close right now, and they just seem out of balance. I mean, losing this game at home, I think, is the big concern. If it was away at Marvel, you'd be like, oh, well, the Bulldogs are strong at Marvel or away, but I think losing at home is a big concern. And if it wasn't for Tom Stewart, they would be in all sorts outside of that. So I think that's a big concern for them, but who knows? Next week they'll turn around and they'll just pump their team, and you'll be viewing them as contenders once again. So it's tough to tell with Geelong where they stand. I think for them it's just a bit of a I don't want to say reality check, because I don't think it's in the same vein like a Carlton have had previously or a Sydney had, where they were so good that was tough. I mean, Geelong had their big slide in the season. Their season almost mirrored the Crows' Essendon game in the sense of if you take a look at it, for the Crows, where we came out so strong in that second quarter, it's their 8-9 goals on the trot. For them, it was 7 wins in a row, and then the slide where we let Essendon get back into it, and they lost I think 6 straight potentially, and now that's kind of evening out and it's balancing a bit, and it'll be interesting to see whether Geelong, in this metaphor, can get over that line, get the win, and make finals, and can they even push further forward and make that top 4. I think it would be interesting to see where they finish up and where they play out. And for the Bulldogs, they'll be a scary side come September. There's a few teams on the cusp of will they make it, will they not, when it comes to finals this year, and that are dangerous, and I think Bulldogs really are one of them. I wouldn't want to be coming up against them. If I was one of the top teams, I think they'll definitely, if you're facing the Bulldogs in a loss after one of the losing teams in the top 4 in your second chance game, I think that's a big concern. And you just, especially if it's, say, a Carlton where you're playing them in Melbourne, I think if you're Sydney or you're Brisbane, you feel a bit more confident playing them at your home ground. So you'd still be wary, still need to take them very seriously. But I think that if you're a Melbourne team facing them in Melbourne, you'd be very concerned. So kind of a pretty short recap. I feel like not much further to discuss for the Bulldogs. I think I said last week that Bont is probably my pick for the Brownlow, but Treloar's been playing sneaky well this year. I think you can see him polling in the 20s for the Brownlow votes, and it may just be a case of he takes them away from Bont and they just both score fairly highly. But it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I think that's the biggest talking points of this game, is it really just that the Bulldogs got the win they needed, and then the Cats, you just can't tell where they stand. I think if I had to put a bet on it, I'd probably say that they'll end up fairly high on the ladder. We'll see when we get to the ladder predictor, and I see their run home how I think it will go. But if they slid and fell out the 8, I would not be shocked. But another team that you have no idea where they'll finish and are right on that cusp is Port, and I think they were able to get the win this week. But let's take a look a bit more at how they got that win against Richmond. Port Adelaide kept their season alive as they got a much needed win against Richmond this week, I should say, as they managed to get the 41-point win over the Tigers in Adelaide. As I said, they just needed to get the win. They've stayed in the 8. I believe or at the very least, they're on that cusp. I think they just have to try and keep winning. I think that they're such a strange side as to how good they are, where do they sit. I think it's a tough one to tell at this stage. They just do not seem to be able to really find, I don't want to say find an identity, but they just don't seem to work out what they want to be. I think a lot of people came into this year with the idea that they'll be a top 4 contender and a premiership contender, given they've shown glimpses of that in previous years, but not been able to get it done over the course of the season. But then they've floundered a bit, and as a Crows fan, love that. So glad that they have, but they've definitely been ones to, I'd say they've failed to achieve and meet the expectations this year so far. I mean, it can all change. If you get into finals, anything can happen. And this win was a big start, or a big step towards that. But I think that they'll be happy. They'll be looking the positives. I mean, Charlie Dixon kicked 4, so getting him into form, and just for them, it's about getting wins at this stage of season. That it was at home, so you never really felt there was any doubt to it. But that was big for them, and I think Ken Hinkley's become a favourite for the West Coast job. There's been rumours about that, which will be interesting. I don't know if you're a West Coast fan, how you feel about that. I mean, Dean Cox was obviously their number 1 target, but he's rejected it, and so he's going to stay at Sydney, which is an interesting move. I think for him personally, I think it seems as though he sees a bit more of a pathway with Sydney in terms of maybe not having to go through the full rebuild that West Coast have, and so he's then chosen to stay at Sydney and follow horse on, and kind of inherit a lot of that squad, which is interesting. So moving to a Ken Hinkley, who every other week seemingly is fighting for his job. It's tough to tell. He'll get up for the derby days against Freo. That'll be for sure. He's always up and about and really showing the passion when it comes to the showdowns. But then again, who will Port ever let him go? Port's side without Ken Hinkley just feels it doesn't feel right at this stage. They've kept him around for so long, kept him through everything they've been, or through all the ups and downs and the rumours of him leaving, I think. So that'll be interesting. And then what do Port go from there? Will that change, inspire the team to get over the line? I mean, they've got an amazing midfield in Horn Francis and Butters and Rosie, as much as I hate to admit it. That they do have the foundations of a really good squad. They just this year haven't been able to put it together. And it seems as though that maybe I want to say almost media fatigue. It's felt like where they've just, the uncertainty around the squad or around the coaching staff and the squad itself is just really caused them issues and just caused things to be off. But they kept their finals hopes alive. They stay in the 8, I believe, and so that's big for them. And Tigers did exactly what they needed to do. They got the loss. They stay bottom. For them, they'll be hoping just to get that number 1 pick and get their rebuild on the move. And so, congrats to them, I guess, on the loss. That's what they're after. If it's not, it's what they should be, and so they can properly rebuild. And I guess the final point of it is congrats to Zach Butters on becoming the most fined player in AFL VFL history. He's now been fined over $36,000, which impressive given his relatively short career in comparison to Toby Green, who just passed. Who I believe Toby Green, it was only a couple of weeks ago he set that record himself. So for Zach Butters to pass it so quick, congrats to him. He plays for Port, so I can't say I'm overly surprised, if I'm being honest. But I guess everyone has their way of de-stressing. Some people game, some holiday, different things, but Zach Butters just clocking blokes on a footy field. So each to their own, I guess. I mean, the fact he can still win the Brownlow in the fairest aspect, he still meets that, is shocking and doesn't make any sense, if I'm being honest, how that can work out. But I guess that is what it is, in discussion for a later day. But I think it just kind of is what it is at this stage. So, but getting back on track, congrats to Port on the win, I guess. You stayed in the 8, do what you need to do. I hope this is your last win for the year. Definitely that round 24 showdown, I'm looking forward to it, and I hope the Crows get the win and knock you out the 8 and bury your final chances. And then Richmond got lost as you needed to do, so I think that's important. But a team that got the win and got a much needed win to keep their not their finals hopes alive, I should say, but to keep their top 4 hopes alive, were the Lions. And so let's get into the Lions versus Swans game. Moving from one big cat in the Tigers to another, as the Lions beat the Swans to keep their top 4 hopes alive. The Swans struggled with injuries at the game, as I believe their biggest injury concern coming out of it is Papley. I think he could be a big loss. I hope for their sake it's just about getting him back before finals. Their spot secured. They'll be in the top 4. They'll be in the top 2, you would say, at this stage, and for sure. And to get that injury is tough. I think if he's back before finals, they'll hopefully say only 3 weeks, give him around 24 to warm back up into it, and then hit finals. But I think that's their big concern coming out of this game, more so than the actual loss itself. And I think Lions, it's a big confidence boost to knock off the top side of the comp at your home ground, get back the Gabba to being the fortress that it was in previous years. I think it was crucial. They had good performances from Zorko and McCluggage and Danaher, which was good to see from their point of view. And I think the Lions are looking like a scary team, and no one wants to be the team facing them at the Gabba. I think if they somehow can get into that top 2, I think if, say, they get into that second spot, if Carlton then finished 3rd, I think you'd be nervous if you're a Blues fan. Otherwise, it may be a case of the finals at the Gabba, when they do get that home final, will be a dangerous outing for any team they come up against, and so they can really try and make another grand final charge like they did last year. And they've got the momentum. They've been unbelievable since the bye, and so things seem to be clicking. I said in last week's episode, I believe, that I do have concerns over whether this is too long of a sustained run for them to keep going through this period and through finals. I can see a struggle where they kind of get to finals and it's almost a mental job done, we got there, and it takes a bit of a setback, and then say they finish 4th, they play Sydney at the SCG, boom, they're out of the top 4, they're back down. Second chance, it'll be at the Gabba, which will help them, but who knows, maybe they get Giants in form or Bulldogs in form, and then they manage to get the win, and then the Lions, after all that good work, end up just going straight out, or out in straight sets, I should say. That's, I think, a real possibility and a real concern if you are the Lions. So I think that's something to be really cautious of, in making sure they've got that mentality of just needing to fight every game and take each win as it comes, and take each game as it comes. I think that's important for them, and but it'll be tough to sustain it from, I believe, round 12 was their bye, all the way through to finals. You're looking then at, 16 games to get through the whole way. To win 16 straight it's a tough ask for any side, but who knows? I believe in their three-peat, one of the sides there was able to do something similar. So maybe it's a part of that Lions culture that they can draw on and look to see how they did it. But I think that's the one concern. But it was good to get this win, a big confidence booster. And before the Q clash next week, which could be a tough game. Thankfully for them, it is at the Gabba, so while only a small trip up the road, the Suns still will be playing away, so Lions will be feeling confident for that. And then they just, as I said, keep taking things as they come and going from there. Lachie Neale didn't have a great game by his standards, which will damage his Brownlow hopes. And so the Brownlow, as things stand, is up for grabs. And so he'd be hoping for the next few weeks to really put a strong case together so he can make that charge. And I think if Lachie Neale's playing well, the Lions will be doing reasonably well as along with him. So that's the big takeaways from the Lions and Sydney game. I think it was, like I said, it was just Swans, unfortunate to lose, but they'll be happy with how they fought with the couple of injuries they did have and being down players, and they'll just be praying that Papley's not out for too long, and the Lions keep the momentum going. Confidence is high as they got the win over a true contender and likely favourites of the comp this year. But from one top four team, or two top four teams I should say, as things stand in the Lions and the Swans, to another team currently sitting in there, we'll see. We'll discuss how the Fremantle Dockers were able to absolutely take the Demons to the sword and go from there. The Fremantle Dockers kept their top four hopes alive thanks to performances from Angus Brayshaw and Caleb Sarong as they beat the Melbourne Demons by 50 points, an impressive display over at Optus Stadium in Perth. I think it's important to note that Fremantle aren't quite getting the media attention that a lot of their fans feel they deserve, and the latter suggest they probably deserve, but I think it's good for the fans to remember, I should say, that sometimes you don't want all that media attention. It can sometimes prove to be a distraction. You just want to keep pretty insular and go game by game, focus on getting wins, and that's how you can try and make a deep run. The media attention has probably more so gone to a bit of a Brisbane, just thanks to their big winning streak that they've had since their bye that we spoke about earlier. That's kind of stolen some of the limelight, you could likely say, and so that's good for them. In my opinion, I think Freo should be happy to kind of stay out the way and then just focus on getting to finals and really making a push there, even though their performances probably deserve some of the limelight a bit more than they're getting, I would say. But it just kind of is what it is when you're an interstate team. It is still a very Victorian-centric media and discussion basis, this league, and that's something they definitely need to work on. But for the time being, just those interstate teams need to just focus on what they're doing, take it game by game, keep racking up wins like this. A 50-point win over Melbourne, although they're not the Melbourne of old, is still an impressive result. And then to carry on that on from previously early in the year when they beat them by even more, I believe at Alice Springs is when that game, or where that game was played, I should say, is impressive. And the Freo will be a real danger come finals for any teams travelling over to Perth. I think that's going to be a struggle. They're going to be in form as it stands. They've got West Coast next week in the Derby, which they'll be looking to get a win and keep that going. So I think all good signs for Freo at this stage. They'll just keep, as I said, keep the momentum going as you head into finals, and hopefully, for your sake, can make a deep run. But one of the reasons why I'd say that media turmoil or that media spotlight is good to stay out of is an example in the Melbourne Demons, who now have rumours once again circulating around Clayton Oliver and potentially a move out of the Demons. The Crows, once again, we've been linked heavily as we were in the off-season just gone. So the Demons' future is really up in the air. They're on the cusp of finals. They're only a couple of points out of the 8, but that form, it's tough to say they're going to actually be able to put it together to make it in time. They've got the list, that's for sure, but you just don't know they're going to be able to find that form and find that cohesion that they've just been missing this year, it's felt. And so the rumours and talks and calls for the head of Simon Goodwin is to be expected in sports nowadays, with as soon as something goes wrong, a manager or a coach is called for and the blame's placed on them. And as a Crows fan, I hope he stays. I hope he turns it around for his sake. I think he's an excellent coach. He was able to bring him that flag a few years ago, and they've been a competitive side since still. It seems as though the off-field turmoil and off-field issues have really derailed their season this year, and it's because it's not even just been the Clayton Oliver news, it's been the Petrarca news, where he's the treatment of his previous injuries, where there's rumours he's unhappy and his friends and family are unhappy with the Demons, but then there's quotes saying he's not, and it's kind of, but there just feels as though there is a fire causing this smoke somewhere, and so it's tough to say for the Demons what's going on back there. And Max Gawn's done a terrific job in fronting the media for all of this, and it's been great to see, I guess, if you're a Melbourne fan, to see your captain really present himself that way and really being able to handle this well. But it's just not an unfair requirement, that an expectation they've laid on at his feet to be able to really take on that role and take those questions. So their off-season, I think, will be interesting, but before they can even get there, they've just got to try and get some momentum and to try and make a finals berth. Just try and get in that 8 and see where they can go from there, because if not, if they're outside of it, their off-season will be really interesting to see what can happen from there. But from one team that's won a premiership in recent years to a team that's really trying to get over the hoodoo and break their near 30-year drought, let's look at the Blues and how they were able to manage to scrape by a valiant North team. Harry Sheezel proved he will be a star of the future once again in this game against the Blues for the Kangaroos. His display of 35 disposals and a couple of goals was really impressive to see for such a young player. I think he's only something like 19, to put on a display like that against one of the top teams in the comp, whose strength is their midfield with the likes of Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh. I think that was really impressive. And North, this is almost the perfect result. You put in a valiant display, you've got your young players really growing and having good performances. Luke Davis-Uniacke was really good. Bailey Scott was impressive there. So I think that's what you're after as a North fan, just seeing that growth. But ultimately, you're not at the stage where you want those wins. You don't want to do what you did last year and cough up wins that'll cost you draft picks. I think they'll still finish above Richmond. I think they are a better side than Richmond, but they're just try and finish as low as you can while keeping the valiant efforts going. And then next year, maybe you should start trying to build your way up those tiers I mentioned earlier, to try and maybe next year you can look to compete with the St Kildas and teams that'll then be in that range, like where the Crows are this year. I'm hoping the Crows are higher up in the ladder, but in that kind of realm is where the Kangaroos will want to be next year. So, but I think that starts with valiant efforts like this one, taking a team that's hoping to go all the way to the grand final and win the flag, to take them all the way in this game. I think was really impressive, and Alistair Clarkson will be really happy with that display. And then, but to ultimately not get the result helps the club overall, I believe. And then you've got on the other side, the Blues. Some can view it as a concerning win for sure. The fact that a team so far down the ladder was able to prove to be such a challenge, so I should say, and that they were able to really take them all the way to the end of the game and really make you fight for it. I think there can be some concern in it, but I think at this stage the Blues just need to get the wins and try and finish as high as possible. That's what they need to work or be focused on and work towards. And so that's what they're doing. And Charlie Curnow kicking 4 really strengthens his case and really gives him a bit of a lead over Jesse Hogan as he goes for another Coleman, which just it'll be interesting to see if he keeps up this rate when it becomes the Curnow medal, when that does happen. So that's that's the big takeaways. I think it's not as big of a concern for Blues fans as some might think, but then Kangaroos fans should be really happy in how that's gone, and it's just about, for the Roos, it's just about putting up a fight and trying to be valiant and seeing your young guys progress, and the Blues, it's just about getting the wins so you can get to finals, try and be injury free, and then make your run there. That's where it's all going to count for the Blues. But that's been the review for round 19 of this week's fixtures. Let's now take a look at round 20 in the week coming, and then from there we'll take a look at the ladder predictor and see where we can go, how this season's going to shape up in my estimation.